Man, I love that song. Did you guys love it? Worthy is the Lamb. Goodness gracious. Are you guys glad to be in church this morning? I appreciate you. I appreciate those of you that are watching online as well. But I'm telling you, you guys braved some weather. Rain, cold. I got up this morning, I heard it. I said, you know what, I think they won't miss me, It seems like it'd be just easier to stay here. I'm glad you're here this morning. Thank you to everybody who's joining us for church. I've got a lot to say again, so I'm just going to get into it. Y'all good with that? I'm thrilled to be sharing part 3 of our series, Seize the Day. One day at a time, each one of us is changing the narrative of our lives, right? We're addressing some giants along our path. This is what I'm saying. We've paused and we've identified some things in our lives that are unacceptable, right? We've specified some things that need changing in our lives. We've recognized some new things that we need to be focused on, and we've pinpointed some fights worth making. Everybody with me? I hope each one of you have done that, whether you like it or not. Seriously. Whether you like it or not, I hope each one of you doing that, because I believe that pausing, taking a look at our lives, assessing and growing, I believe it's a good thing. I believe it's a great thing. I also believe that it is biblical. I'm doing it myself. This year, right now, around end of December, January, I paused. I looked at my life and I thought about some things that I would like to do. It's been a big part of my life for the last 4 or 5 years, and I haven't really been forthcoming. I haven't shared with you guys any of my recent goals or my new resolutions, or any of the life-changing things that I'm trying to do. So before we get into the content today, the message today, I would like to just share some stuff with you guys, or share one thing with y'all. Is that okay? That way I can assure you guys that I'm practicing what I'm preaching. Okay? When I was a kid, I loved to read. I'm talking about when I was really little, I loved to read, and my sister did too. One of the reasons is our mom, I think, needed to get rid of us at times, so we had mandatory reading time. She would put us in our rooms. She'd say, it's quiet time. Y'all go read. And so we read, and I loved reading. And I'll never forget how much my imagination and how inspired I was, even as a little kid. And I got to be honest with you guys, looking back at my life and how well I did in elementary school, up into middle school, I guarantee you had a lot to do with the fact that I read. And I read all the time. But then something tragic happened. I discovered girls. I became a teenage boy, and my mind shifted to other things, and I stopped reading. Sitting down and just enjoying a book at the house, that went out the window. And I got to be honest with you guys, I've thought about it a lot over the last couple of years, and I bet you from high school all the way through college, I bet you guys I never read another book, even the books we were assigned to read. Because I learned about Cliff Notes and the internet. There's going to be some teachers that are going to be real angry at me, but you can pass the test with Cliff Notes and the internet, okay? I'm just being honest. But anyway, I thought about it a lot over the last couple of years, and one of the things is, I bet you the only books I have read since childhood were probably the books that Ronnie Hodge gave me when he started mentoring me and said, these are books you need to read. This is I'm telling you, it's like a seminary degree if you read this book. And the Bible. That's the only books I've read. But over the last couple of years, I've noticed something missing. I kind of felt this missing link. I began to discover that I wasn't really well read. I wasn't taking advantage of the creativity and the knowledge or the imagination of other people the way that I did as a child. And there was just this thought process in my mind that I was missing something, that this was something that I should do. So over the last couple of years, I have started to read a little bit more. But this year, for the first time, I set a goal. I've never set a goal about reading until this year. This year, I want to read 12 books. 12 books. I want to read a book a month. And I not like Dr. Seuss, like a book about something important. I want to read what other people have to say about God, about leadership, about life, about love, about parenting, the world, anything. I want to read books that challenge me. I want to read books that have other people's perspective about life, and I want to see what they have to say. I want to be inspired above all things. I want it to inspire me in ways that I can teach and share. That's what I really want. So that's one of the fights I'm making in my life. I wanted to share that with you guys. Now let's get back to you. Everybody good? If you're just joining us, we began 2 weeks ago in the book of 1 Samuel, chapter 17, and we're following a young man named David. So if you want to turn your Bibles, that's where we're going to be again, 1 Samuel, chapter 17. And without being enlisted in the army or even called to arms, young David, who's a teenager, just so happened to be on a battlefield when he heard the challenge of an enemy Philistine giant named Goliath. And the challenge went something like this. One-on-one battle to the death, winner take all. Whoever wins the entire battle for their army. Now, Goliath didn't just issue the challenge. As a matter of fact, for 40 days, morning and evening, this was the 41st day, Goliath had been issuing that challenge, but then he would just sit out there and he would just berate the Israelite army. And then he would degrade their God. This was David's God. This was the God that David loved. This was the God that David relied on every single day of his life. And David hears Goliath issuing this challenge and beginning to disparage his God. And David thinks to himself, he says, this just won't do. This cannot stand. I have to do something about this. David reached a conclusion upon looking at the frightened faces of the soldiers around him. This is not acceptable. I'll go fight him. Everybody with me? Everybody remember? I'll go fight him. And it was that statement that we decided was huge for us when it comes to our lives and when it comes to the battles and the giants that all of us face. There are giants in each one of our lives. There are battles on our horizon, and we must realize that those are our fights to make. Your relationship with God. Your relationship, Scott, with God. Tony. Heather. Your relationship with God in a hostile, demanding world. That's your fight to make. Your relationship with your spouse. Your relationship with your spouse surrounded by temptations, surrounded by distractions, with plenty of things and options of things that you could disagree on. Those are your fights to make. Your kids, their well-being, their spiritual well-being. In a world full of temptation, of contaminants, of junk, influences and dangers, your kids are your fight to make. Your health, your finances, addictions, friendships, schedule, your life, day to day is your fight to make. Everybody got it? That was lesson 1 for us, and that is important. You have to understand, you have to realize that you have a fight to make in your life. Hopefully you were able to pinpoint one. Back to our story, David, realizing that he needed to go and make this fight, he addressed King Saul with this offer and these intentions. Don't worry about the Philistine, I'll go fight him. Now, David was immediately met with discouragement. The king said, that's ridiculous, David. You could not win. There's no way that you could possibly win this battle. But David begins to explain his reasoning. Here's why I think I should go fight this fight. Here's why I think I should, King Saul. And you remember what he said? Everybody with me? He said, I've been entrusted with my father's sheep my whole life. I've taken care of them. I've watched over them. Every day, whenever I had to take care of them, no matter what I had to do, no matter where I had to take them, they were mine to take care of. But when bears and when lions would show up and want to take these sheep, they would take one of the lambs. I would chase that bear or that lion down. I would catch it. I would take the lamb from its mouth, and then I would beat it to death, holding it by the jaw. Y'all remember that? That's how David was my hero. That's why. David said, this is why I'm going to do the same thing to this Philistine. God has always protected me. God has always been with me. God has always fought these battles with me, and He's going to help me today. This is who I am. We learned something valuable for David in our second message, and that is, and it's imperative in our own fights. This is imperative in our own fights, that fighting is a habit. David's response to this giant was that of habitual faith. I am a fighter. I go fight. God protects me. We win. That's how it goes for me, Mike. That's what I do. David had habitually done what was right. He had habitually done what was good. And he habitually took care of what had been entrusted to him. That's why he was willing to go fight. Fighting is a habit. In our fights, the habits matter. What we do day to day, the most mundane, seemingly small task, they must be habits that are building our faith. They must be habits that are leading us and taking us to these goals, these visions that we have for where we believe God wants us to be. These habits they have to be helping to change the direction of our lives. We can have great, grand ideas of what we want to do, but the truth to be told is what we do every day on a day-to-day basis, the habits that we keep, they matter most. This is a sentence. If you want to write a sentence, this is a good one to write. The habits we keep will inevitably determine the places we reach. You got it? Are y'all with me this morning? Y'all feeling intense? I'm not. The habits we reach will inevitably determine the places we reach. Are y'all ready to keep going? Y'all want to know more? Good. I do too. We're right where we left off last week, verse 37. I'm going to read it to you just so you know this. We're just picking this story right back up. The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of this Philistine. This is the end of David's speech, and it must have been a doozy because it convinces Saul, okay, this kid means business. This kid, he's serious. He's not just messing around. He knows what he wants to do. Saul said to David, "Go, and the Lord be with you." Now, you can read that with a lot of different connotation. I don't know. I just imagine Saul going, "Go, and God be with you, man." That's how I hear it. I don't really know the condition of Saul's faith in David. But I think I have an idea because what Saul immediately begins to do is Saul goes to his chest and he opens it up and he calls for some help and they begin to bring in all of Saul's war gear for David. Read this, verse 38. Then Saul dressed David in his own tunic. And then he put a coat of armor on him and a bronze helmet on his head. Now, y'all got to hang on a second. We know, when I think about this part of the story, it always strikes me a little funny because we know that Saul is a grown man. I told you guys, I think in the first message, that he was tall, dark, and handsome. That's how he's described in the Bible. And so Saul is a 40-year-old man, at least at this time. David's 14. For some reason, I just imagine my oldest daughter, Andy, in like one of my shirts down to her ankles, just standing there like as Saul is dressing him. Not only that, but we actually have a little information on Saul and exactly how big he was. 1 Samuel chapter 9, verse 2 describes Saul this way. Listen to this. His son Saul was the most handsome man in Israel. There you go. That's a pretty good title. I would take that one. Here we go. Look at this. Head and shoulders taller than anyone else in the land. Now, make sure you heard that. Head and shoulders taller than anyone else in land. This is not saying that Saul was tall. This is saying that Saul was the tallest dude in the land. So let's just say that people were smaller then. Historically, we know people were of smaller stature. So let's just say that a tall man would have been 6 foot. That makes Saul at least 7 feet tall. That joker should be going out and fighting Goliath, right? He's 7 feet tall. But I want you to imagine that his 7 foot tall armor, his helmet, which had to be like size 8 easy, something like that. And all of this he's placing on David. Verse 39 says this. David fastened on his sword, this is Saul's sword, over his tunic, and tried walking around because he was not used to them. Now, how do y'all see David walking? Can't you see him doing that? Can't you see him just shuffling his feet in this heavy armor that he has on? Can you hear it? Yeah, walking sideways. How am I going to do that? The bronze helmet just rolling over his eyes, having to pick it back up. Unsheathing the sword. Got it. David tries to says he was not used to them. David says this. Now, man, I'm telling you, this is a courageous thing to say. This is the king. This is the king's armor. You're getting the honor of getting to wear his stuff. Look at what he says. I cannot go in these, he said to Saul, because I'm not used to them. So he took them off. You see this? So you see, clang, clang. He piles his stuff up in the floor. David thinks for a second. This is what I see happening. Let's go imaginate with me, okay? He piles the stuff up on the floor, and David's sitting there, and I'm sorry, King, sorry. And he's thinking, how should I proceed? That's not going to work. How do I fight this battle? How do we win? Look at what David does. Verse 40 says, then he took his staff in his hand. Now this was his staff. This was his shepherd's staff he had brought with him. The staff would have been a wooden stick with a little hook at the end. I imagine he'd done some clubbing, is what I'm assuming. Then he went and chose 5 smooth stones from the stream. So he walked down to a creek. Took some time. He knelt down in the creek. He chose perfect rocks for his mission. One at a time. It says that he took 5 of those stones and put them in the pouch of his shepherd's bag. And with a sling in his hand, he approached the Philistine. All right, y'all got to stop. You got to stop with me just a second. Let's break it down. Let's make sure you understand what he's done, what he's choosing. First of all, we got the shepherd's staff. Makes sense, right? He's a shepherd. He's used this weapon before. Makes sense. But then we're kind of introduced to something completely new, something that we haven't heard anything about in this story or really prior to this. He chooses 5 rocks, and he has this sling. Now, I'm a curious guy, right? I wanted to learn something about this. I don't know anything about slings or stones or anything, so I went and did some research for you guys. And this is what I discovered. A sling is actually a rope, a braided rope traditionally, and it has a leather patch kind of in the middle of it, and they double it up and hold it. Now this leather patch is meant to hold the rock. It looks just like this. I have a picture of it. That's what it looks like. Really long ones at the time would be about 3 feet long. Because the longer it was, the farther you could sling a rock. And the rocks weren't Crusher Run number 57 gravel for my grading people. They looked kind of like this. These are actual rocks that were found. These are sling rocks found in Israel. Look at it, the size of a tennis ball. Now, this is how this would work. Now, in the movies we see, now, a sling and the stones was very common. It would be likened to the archery equipment of the day. So you would have a wave of soldiers shooting arrows, and you would have a wave of rock slingers. Okay, that's what we're going to call them because we're in Walhalla, South Carolina. Okay, and these guys would throw rocks, and they could throw the rocks. When you read, they could throw the rocks as far as those guys could shoot the arrows. So 100 to 200 yards, they could fling those big old rocks. Could you see one of those coming at you? They'll fling them. Now, in the movies, a lot of times you see them sling like this, right? Now what they do, you know, like that. That's not. I did some research. I watched some YouTube videos on the proper technique. You can learn anything on YouTube, guys. Just be careful. Choose good keywords. All right, listen. These guys, listen to me. They actually threw them the way fast pitch softball is. That's how they threw them. No big wind up, no just going crazy. One big one, just like slow pitch softball. They would take this thing and have it, and they go, pow! You know, y'all ever watch those ladies in a college softball? I'm gonna tell you something. When I was in high school, I knew some softball players. I played baseball. I think I told you that in the last. And I got invited a time or two by a couple girls to go and to try to hit them pitching fast pitch softball. And I got up there, and this girl, man, she sets up. She's like smiling. She's all sweet looking, got her hair in braids. And she's like, okay, you ready? I said, yeah, I'm ready. And she goes, bow! And throws it. And I thought I died. I thought I died. I thought when I stood up, I'm like, oh, it's yellow, it's big, it's going to be so much easier. That's the scariest moment of my life right there. I'm not going to lie to you. That's kind of the way these guys did. But imagine they have this rock and a rope, so man, they're able to get velocity. It says they could throw it 60 and 80 miles an hour was how fast these rocks are running. It's crazy. That's the weapon that David has. That's what he's going to do. So David shirks Saul's armor. He picks up his staff. He chooses 5 stones. He gathers them. He gets his sling in hand, and he walks out towards the Philistine. Are you guys ready? Okay, well, next week we'll get into that. We're stopping there today. I know, man. I know. I'm sorry. But there's a lesson you got to see in what we've already read. The battle's coming. But there's a lesson you got to see. You ready? You got your pens in hand? If you're about to fight, you best have a good plan. If you are about to walk out to a fight, you best have a good plan. You best have a plan that is right for you. I know there is no mention of David taking hours and figuring out what he wants to do. Like, we have no concept really, because of the way the story is written, of time and how long he took to do all of these things he has. So I know there's no mention that he did that. He didn't take out a pen and paper and draw Goliath and be like, I'm going to stand here and I'm going to do that. There's no mention of anything like that. However, I believe it is obvious in the story, if you put yourself in David's place, to see that David was thinking, he was and deciding, and he was planning how this battle should go. Do you see it? Do you see it? I believe David assessed the situation. He had already seen the giant. He took account of who the giant was, how big he was, where he was standing, everything else. And he goes to Saul. He heeds Saul's suggestions. He determines what wasn't going to work. He chose what would work for him and what he was comfortable with and what he thought he could do. And he prepared for a fight. That's what he did. I have a hunch. David had a plan. David was mapping out in his mind how best to proceed. He was mapping out in his mind, this is how we can win. This is how I should fight. Do you see that? If the fights we are making in our lives, so we have these fights that we've decided we want to make, and we have bad habits that we're trying to break, and we have good habits that we're trying to put into our lives. If they have any chance of success, listen to me, you best have a plan. You best have a plan. There's an old adage. I bet you can repeat it back to me if I say it. I'm going to test you guys right here. Fail to plan, plan to fail. I'm telling you, it's simple and it seems, and I know we kind of think stuff like that's silly, but I want to tell you something. If you fail to make a plan in the fights that you are going out to address, whether it's in your relationship with God or your marriage or with your kids or in your finances or whatever, if you fail to plan, I'm going to tell you something, you will surely fail. If you don't take seriously the work that is involved in looking forward and thinking through the details, I'm telling you, you will fail. A goal without a plan is a wish. That's another one I read recently. A goal without a plan is just a wish. And we have a really bad habit with our resolutions or with these life-changing commitments we make of turning them into wishes rather than planning for them to succeed. A goal without a plan. Without any sort of arrangement or order or set of steps or preparation, this is the truth, we're sure to fail. So this ought to be your question then. This should be the question you're asking me. How do we plan, Tim? I mean, how do we look at these fights that we have in front of us? We've kind of addressed some of the habits. We know the habits that we need to put in life. So what does planning really look like? I believe I can look back at our story and I can show you how David did it. And I'm telling you, there's a lot of questions you can ask. There's a lot of things you could do. But I believe David asked 3 questions to himself that helped him plan. Can I share them with you? 3 questions that David asked that I believe helped him to make a good plan for his fight. Here it is. Question number 1. What's not realistic? Right up front, what's unrealistic? David received instant input on how best to proceed in the fight, right? Saul was there. Saul's putting armor on him. And can't you just see Saul coaching him up? Saul putting the armor mail on him and saying, all right, man, here's the deal. You need to wear this because, man, if that 15-pound spear tip hits you directly, you are a goner. You know what I mean? So we're going to try to get something on you. You need to wear this helmet because I'm pretty sure if the Goliath gets near you, he can just squish your head with his hand. So here's what we're going to do. Here's my sword. It's sharp. And I think if you could hit Goliath in the toe with it, you could win. Saul is trying to help him. But as Saul is dressing David, and as he's coaching David, David begins to realize this armor is too heavy. I can't move well in this armor. He realizes that the helmet is obstructing his vision. He realizes that as he begins to move around, David thinks to himself, man, I'm so much slower in this armor. I'm a little uneasy. This armor is not the best fit for me. David realizes that this battle plan, although maybe it would work great for Saul, it's not realistic for him. Do you see it? I can't tell you how many times in people's battles I've watched people begin that fight and their steps are about as unrealistic as they could possibly be. And because of that, they are destined to fail. I can't tell you how many times I see that. And it happens for a couple of reasons. One of the first reasons I think it happens that we end up with these unrealistic plans for how to proceed is we get real excited. And we get really fired up about this battle that we're about to run into. And so we set some unrealistic expectations. So we go, all right, I want to get healthy, right? So I'm going to go to the gym 5 days a week for 3 hours a day, and I'm never eating sugar again, ever. I'm done with sugar. Sugar is gone from my diet. And what we didn't consider is a couple of things. First of all, we didn't think about the fact that sugar is in every corner of our office. We didn't consider the fact that we had 2 birthday parties to attend this week where there would be cake and ice cream. And we forgot that the Dairy Queen exists. You know what I'm saying? This is what happens. This is what we get excited and we're fired up. So we make this grand gesture. This is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to do it. And then one of those things happens, temptation happens, and we get a little bit of sugar and we eat some ice cream and we go, well, that's over. That's done. I failed. I didn't reach my goal. My goal was this. We end up with this unrealistic. It just doesn't make any sense. I'm sure that David looked up to Saul. I'm sure this was his, you know what I mean? I'm sure that this advice made sense in a lot of places. I'm sure David was even excited and scared. But I want to show you what David did. He paused. He looked at the armor. He tried it out, is what we're told. He tries a few steps, he looks, and he goes, this just won't work. I cannot uphold this. I can't continue this way. So he piled it up in the floor, and he came up with a plan that worked for him. Consider doing the same thing. As you head into your fight, as you're planning, what's not realistic? What's not realistic? What could you do? Consider a step in the right direction. There's another reason I think we have unrealistic plans. We end up with these unrealistic plans. We have a real tendency to look and to listen and to compare ourselves to others. Can I be honest with you guys? You get on social media and you see somebody doing something You see a fitness person on there, or you see somebody showing you all that they do, and we begin to compare ourselves. We say, well, that's what we have to do. Then I have to shoot for that. Or maybe maybe you just have a friend, or maybe it's a hero that you have in your life or something, and you look and you think, well, maybe I need to just do what they're doing. Maybe I need to do it exactly the way they are doing it. Saul wanted David to be victorious. I'm sure that David looked up to Saul as his king. But David had the wherewithal to go, I can't fight the way he wants me to fight. I can't do what he would do in this fight. That's not how I win. That's not what's going to work for me. I've experienced this firsthand. You guys know I have been great friends and I've been mentored by Ronnie Hodge since I was, basically 19, 20 years old. And one thing about working with Ronnie Hodge is when Ronnie Hodge comes into the office, and he's never, and I want to make sure I say this clearly, he's never pushed any of this on me. He's never tried to press me to do anything specifically other than us just talking about good things. But Ronnie would come into the office, and he would say, man, I've been up since 3 this morning, and I've just been with God. And I have read the Bible, and he would say, man, I've got 10 sermon ideas from this morning. And I have prayed. I prayed for 6 hours today for you. He didn't really ever said that, but you know what I'm saying. And I journaled today. I wrote 17 pages, Tim McCall. I wrote 17. He was just this to me. Look at all he shared with me. And he would share all these things with me. And I remember sitting there for years and years and years, listening to Ronnie talk about that and going, I've got to do that. I've got to figure out how to do that. And so I would get up. I would say, I'm getting up early. I'm going to sit down with my Bible. God, give me stuff like you give Ronnie. I would say, I want to write in my journal. And I would sit there and I would write. And I'd have 2 sentences. And they're not even punctuated. It's just, I'm like, I'm getting nothing. And I would feel I would try that getting up early, and then I would fail. I'd do it like 3 days, and I'd be like, I'm too tired, man. I can't even function. You know what I mean? I would try to do some of the things he would do, and I'm at the stage right now where I got 3 kids. So trying to do the things that he's doing, it just don't work that way. You know what I mean? He's like, man, I just rode down the road, didn't even listen to radio, just had a time with God. I'm riding down the road, and I got kids going, like, blah, 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 just playing in the back of the car. You know what I mean? So I can't, it's not my quiet time. I can't do that. Finally, one day it hit me. I'd like to be there. I would love to have that kind of relationship with God and to spend that much time in the Word and to get up that early and to journal and it just pour out of me and to have 10 sermons from one piece of Scripture. Like, I would love that. But maybe I shouldn't try to start there. Maybe that's not realistic for me. He is my hero in that. And I want to get there. What can I do now that takes me there? How can I make a plan that works for me? This is what you need to understand. The battle plan needs to be realistic for you. And I want to say this. It needs to be realistic. It can be hard. It should be challenging. It should be an extraordinary life change. I believe that. But it can be realistic as well. There can be steps to get you there. You need to understand this is a marathon, not a sprint that you're in. You can't change all at once. Everything about your life. You got it? So what's not realistic? What is unrealistic? Question 2 is kind of a follow-up. How can I be successful? What can I do? What are my strengths? Where are the gaps in my schedule? What works best for me? It's really a follow-up to it, but you have to answer, okay, here are the unrealistic things. Now, what can I do is the second question. David, think about the story. David took and he looked at his life and he said, okay, what can I do? Well, I can club something to death with a staff if it comes to it. I can do that. So I need that. I can also sling stones. Now, I don't know where this came from, but I have an idea. I believe David sat there tending those sheep all those years, and he had his sling and his rock, and this was a pastime. I believe David was out there just yelling like, bah! Just hitting a tree or something with these rocks and practicing all the time. That's what I think. The reason I know that is because when we worked on a farm, and I had all my guys, and we worked on a farm, we could throw acres like it was nobody's business. And the reason is all day, every day, when we just had a little bit of downtime, we were hitting each other with acorns. So this was something that David had practiced. This was something that David had done hours and hours on end. David assessed the situation. He looked at the giant and he said he's covered in armor from here to there. He has a bronze helmet. But right there between his eyes, if I could put a rock right there, we might could win. So you have to look at your battle. You have to look at these habits. You have to look at everything exactly the same way. You have to analyze it and go, what can I do? When can you have a quiet time in your schedule? What can you do? 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever. What can you do? What can you make work? Can you sit in your truck for just an extra few minutes before you walk into the office and just have a prayer for just a minute? Can you do that? Before you head into the office, on your ride, can you just turn on worship music? Can you listen to a podcast while you're riding down the road? If you got kids in the car, then when could you do it another time? Could you do it while you're walking or while you're at the gym or whatever? Listen to something that's going to benefit you, that's going to help you. What can you do? How can you and your spouse spend time together? Maybe you can't go on a date night once a week. Can you go on a date night once a month? At least then you got something to look forward to. At least then you're knocking steps out of this thing. You're working towards something. What productive things can you do with your kids? What is a way to get maximum impact with your kids and your time together? Where can you cut back financially? Like really. Like if the finances is a part of your goal, then really look at your finances. Write out a budget and just look. It's not hard. You can take a tear-off piece of paper and you can look at this and go, okay, what could we live without that'd save us $12? Or save us 30. At least then we're doing something. At least then you are discovering and analyzing what can you do. Look at the resources that you have at your disposal. Look at the things that you have around you or the people that you have around you that could help you along this journey. I'm telling you, you got to look at what you have. You got to pick the right stones. Pick the right weapons. Look at those things. What can you do? Third question. Everybody ready? Third question, help you plan. What if? And I knew I was going to have some people, when I said David asked himself, what if, that were going to be like, oh, don't you dare say that about David. David's walking out on that battlefield. He did not ask what if. I think I can prove to you that he did ask what if. I think he picked up 5 rocks. Now I want to show you something. And I want to make sure I'm clear. Everybody listen to me? David didn't pick up 5 rocks. And that was because that was a lack of faith. That's not showing us some lack of faith on his part. David picked up 5 stones because he had a mindset of preparation. He knew, I'm walking into a fight. What if this doesn't go exactly the way I'm planning? What if this doesn't go exactly the way I'm envisioning? What if I got time to throw 5 rocks at him before he gets here? David believed in God. He trusted in God, or else he would have never walked out on the battlefield. But he was prepared. We have to ask the exact same question. We have to ask, what if it doesn't go exactly like we're thinking it's going to go? What if there's a disruption? What if something happens in our habits or in our lives that disrupts this journey we're trying to be on, that gets in the way of this fight we're trying to make? So you wake up late one day. What happens if you wake up late? When am I going to spend time with God then? If all you have is 5 minutes in the morning and you wake up late and you go, well, God, peace. You know what I mean? You're not get me day. No, that's not what you do. What do? You plan. What if it doesn't go exactly like a plan? Are there other times in my schedule that I could be with God? Are there other times that I could spend with Him? Something happens at work, a late meeting, or you just have a really bad day, and you're not going to be able to make it to the gym. You got to get the kids, you got to get food, you got to do whatever, so you're not going to do your exercise. Can you go do something different? Could you turn that into a win? Could you go and get your kids and say, kids, we're going on just a walk around the neighborhood tonight because that's all we can do? At least then, you're doing something. Your date night gets messed up. Time that you had with your spouse, how can you make that up? How can you alter your schedule? You're trying to save up your finances. Something happens with your car, messes up. I'm going to tell you, this is going to happen. You start saving money, you know what's going to happen. Something's going out on the car or the washing machine. Guaranteed one of those two things. And you got to get it fixed. You say, well, you just give up? You just go, well, saving money's out? No. Have a plan. Look and say, where else can we sacrifice? If that happens, we were going to eat out twice a week. You know what? This happened. This messes up our plan. We're still in the fight. We're going to miss those eat outs. That's what we're going to do. Someone opens a brand new can of Copenhagen in your face. This was a fight I made a long time ago. Someone standing there, you're talking to a buddy, and he opens a brand new can of Copenhagen right in your face. You smell that sweet aroma, and you just want to take his life and take the can of dip. I'm serious. That's how I was. Yep. I'm serious. What do? You go get a pack of sunflower seeds. That was my plan. I had a whole tub of sunflower seeds that I would go get. I want to tell you something. You better ask yourself, what if? Because you're in a fight. Are you listening to me? You're in a fight, and you have an enemy, and you live in this world, and they don't want you to have a great relationship with God. They don't want you to have a great relationship with your spouse or your children. They don't want you to feel good about yourself and your health. They don't want you to get rid of that addiction. I'm telling you. And so it's going to be a fight. There are blips and there are things that are going to come up in this fight. And you best be prepared for them. You best have a plan of how you proceed around the disruptions. You got it? If you're going to get in a fight, guys, you best have a plan. What's unrealistic? What can you do? And what if it doesn't go exactly as planned? Those are questions you have to answer. So as you're looking at your fights, I want to encourage you to do this. Look at them, take a piece of paper, and make a plan. Make a plan. What can you do? How can you make this work? How can you make this where you get to the end of the year and you've gotten where you wanted to be? You've accomplished the goals you set. You've kept a resolution. You've made a life-changing commitment. Make sense? Let me pray for you. Father, I thank you so much for each and every person that's here. I thank you for the battles that they are fighting. I'm thankful for the habits that I've had a chance to talk to a lot of people and their habits that they're putting into their lives. And I am so thankful for that. I'm thankful for I want to say this, for the practicality of your Bible. The fact that we can look at your word and we can see things that apply to our lives that actually help us navigate a day-to-day journey, a day-to-day fight. Father, this is my prayer. I pray that you will help us plan, that we will plan in such a way as to lead us to victory, to lead us closer to you, better relationships on this earth, to make us into the people that you want us to be. God, that is my prayer. Help us see the things that are maybe unrealistic for us, but help us to determine the steps that we could take, no matter how small, no matter how seemingly we might think it's insignificant to take it, but help us to see this is the step that I must take. This is the thing that I must do, God, and then help us to be prepared for a fight. There will be disruptions. There will be stuff that tries to get in the way. Help us to plan for that as well. Help us to circumvent those things, overcome those things, God, and honor you. That is my prayer. I am thankful. Help us to seize the day, one day at a time, so that you can take us where you want us to be. Father, I'm thankful for each and every person here. Use them in their community, in their circle, with the people that they have in their lives. And Father, we're very thankful. In Jesus' name, everybody says amen. I love you very much, church. I hope you have a great Sunday, and we'll see you next Sunday. Bye-bye.